So I like that he finished saying we need the science, and here I am. I'm the science. So I'll try to be brief with my presentation. I just finished my first year as a PhD student at the University of Cumbria, and my PhD started 1 year ago. And they told me it's about using wool for restoring bare peat. And I was like, oh, sounds really cute. And it took me really little time to understand how necessary was collecting data for the use of wool on peatland restoration. And as because you saw today, so many times people spoke about BACI, baseline, and data collection. So here I am, and my presentation is kind of about risk, evidence gaps, and validation pathways for wool in peatland restoration. First of all, as they told you at the beginning, there are QR codes all around the room, and these are they will take you to a small survey. Just takes a couple of minutes, and this survey is about your experience and opinion on the use of wool on bare peat and peat restoration. And again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to collect any data, because at this point in time, any data is a good data. And even understanding your experience, if you have seen wool used on a peat, or what is your opinion about the positive and the negatives, is extremely valuable. And if we will have any data later, we can start to check it during the workshop. So let's start, and I will fly through some of the slides because people have already spoke about it, but I think I'm in the perfect place during this workshop to speak as a last speaker, because my role in the wool journey as a material for peat restoration is exactly being between practice and testing, and being the first step in understanding wool as a material and understanding how it works, how well it works. And this will be, I think, incredible, valuable data, both for practitioners, for policymakers, to make this fantastic product valuable for restoring peat. And sorry, okay. And again, this has already been said, but why wool, why now? Around 80% of UK peatlands are degraded or severely degraded, and the value of wool dropped drastically in the last decade. In the last 2 years, actually, the value of wool started to increase again. I don't know if you noticed, but the value of coarse wool, for example, like the Welsh, the Swaindale, is still really low, sometimes even lower than the cost of shearing. So, and at the same time, stone, coir, and geotextile are expensive materials and sometimes carbon intensive, and most of them they are imported. So it would be lovely to use this product that is wool, that is local, biodegradable, and available. And but here's the challenge. Up to now, wool has been mostly experimental and anecdotal. So as you can saw today, that we saw so many beautiful and interesting experiences in the use of wool, but not many people spoke about baseline measurements and data collection. And it was lovely to start seeing it, because in the first year of my PhD, I was looking at it and was like, nobody knows anything about the use of wool for peatland restoration. And the only thing that I could find online was this paragraph from the Peatland Action Technical Compendium that really smartly says that we need to test wool. Wool is probably a really useful material for peatland restoration, but we need to monitor and risk assess before it can be recommended at a scale. And this is not a barrier, it's an opportunity, and I think is our responsibility to do before really recommending this material as for peatland restoration. And obviously, this is because peatlands are fragile, and I do agree that peatlands at this point is they're so degraded that sometimes just doing something is better than doing nothing. But is also, I feel the urgency of knowing, for example, about and I will get into it later, about all the possible risks that could come with the use of wool. Never heard of microalgae, for example, and I'm like, oh wow, what does it mean? So I think the goal for all of us would be to maximize the benefits while minimizing the risks. And again, this is not a yes or no to wool, is could be a when, where, and how to use it responsibly. Okay, so then my scientific mind started to start to break this problem. And what is the core question? The core question is, does wool work? We saw today, probably yes, but then how well it works, under what limits, and with what trade-offs. And my brain immediately split this problem in two parts. That is the physical variables or the physical improvements and the chemical improvements or chemical risks. And my two questions that popped in my mind were, can wool stabilize the graded peatland surface against erosion, trampling, and harsh weather, like, wind, heavy rain, trampling, lower maybe the albedo effect, and so the evapotranspiration, and having an effect against freeze and thawing and drying and wetting cycles. And at the same time, does wool change the peat chemistry in ways that supports recovery without harmful side effects, like lowering pH and maybe releasing some nutrients that for highly degraded peatland could be actually an improvement? And sorry. And here is where my project comes into place. And I'm not here to replace the practitioner work. I'm just here to kind of trying to put academic structure and science into it. And because together, practice and research can help move wool from a promising experiment to a proven restoration tool. And to solve, to try to answer to this question, my project is divided in two type of experiments, that is on the field and in the lab. In the field, I will, and I am applying raw wool, and we can discuss later why I chose raw wool, but I thought that the biggest interest right now was to understand how raw wool, the cheapest material that you could use, affects peat. So in the field, I'm gonna drop raw wool on quadrants and measure it through time, the changes mostly in the chemical properties of the peat. And in the lab, I am creating mesocosms experiments on peat cores, and I am torturing these peat cores with freeze, thaw, and dry wetting cycles to see how this peat, where I applied wool both on top and mixed in the first 5 centimeters, can improve the properties. And I'm measuring this with like this beautiful video shows you X-ray CT tomography of a peat core that my group is really good at using this technique. And the idea is that we could have not only a 3D on the structure of peat, but also a fourth dimension by measuring the same core multiple times to see how the peat structure, the pore network, the density, and the overall look of the peat changes if you apply wool on top of it and freeze and defreeze it multiple times. And I thought this would be the easiest way to have a physical like literally a 3D view on what happens to the peat structure. And at the same time, I will measure chemical with through lab and the field chemical analysis, the pH dynamics and nutrient release that I saw today. That is a really big worry, is nutrients with ammonia and other contaminants. I found really, and if you have any suggestions, please do. I found a big struggle in finding labs to measure pesticides, mostly pyrethroids. So if anyone has some suggestion, please come to me. And the last part, and that is becoming bigger and bigger for my PhD, is that the idea of creating Arduino-based environmental stations that measure continuously changes in pH, moisture, temperature, and groundwater level, because sometimes, as you well know, it's really hard to get to a bog, and it would be lovely if this data were collected more often and cheaply, because some of these sensors are just a couple of pounds. And yeah, it's much harder than it sounds like. So if you have, again, any suggestion or any experience with it, please come to me. And this was just a 5 minutes exercise that I done a couple of days ago, where for 5 minutes, I thought at all the possible variables that could influence positively or negatively um, the use of wool for restoring bare peat. And as you can see, it's a gigantic amount of variables. And so again, I want to stress how it's important to collaborate together, and every one of us will bring a small piece of the puzzle. And I hope that my PhD will be one of these pieces. And I think it will not take that long to have an answer. And as you can see, it's really promising the for wool. And so let's see. And again, I think no one really spoke about this, but I come from a geochemistry background, and as a geologist, science is quite hard. I don't know how to describe it. And coming to an environmental sector, into restoration sector, I find that there is so much energy and so much proudness on inventing new techniques and moving forwards. But sometimes the restoration moves faster than the science can keep pace. And so I put together here a list of wishful thoughts on how I think we should do restoration, not just on studying wool this way, but every product like coir that we know really little about, and every technique, so we can be more evidence-based, holistically appraised, and be impact assessed, sustainable, safe and scalable, socially responsible, and to put all together innovative but rigorous. So just to close, yes, super fast. Just to close, yeah, yeah. Wool, as you saw today, has an incredible potential, and but the next step is to collect evidence, right? My research is a small contribution to your trials and expertise, and all of those are vital. And I think all of those will help us move from uncertainty to best practice through evidence. So again, like this is just rhetoric, but if we do this right, wool can become a trusted tool in restoration, delivering climate, biodiversity, and community benefits. And I think we all agree on that. And to close on a funny note, yeah. On a funny note, sometimes Pete they test us as much as we test them, and this is when I stopped using wellies, because this is my second pair that I lost. So yeah, again, this is the QR code. If you want to share it with anyone, it will be alive for 2 weeks, I think, and it would be lovely to know if you've seen wool used somewhere. So again, thank you.
Fabio, well done. Welcome to the space. It's great to have you. I've two questions, but I'll ask one. So the first one is the nutrients that you're measuring. How do you separate out the atmospheric deposition of nitrogen?
It's like if you ask me science questions, we have to sit and with a beer.
That's okay. It's okay. I'm staying tonight. That's okay.
Yeah. I think I will for sure measure changes. So like it's relative change in precipitation. And what I will do is I will measure on the quadrants and I will measure outside the quadrants. So again, my way of seeing this project is always through before, after control impact. So that I think is the best way. And everything I do it with a control. And to answer your question, that is the answer practically. But also I will try to have both on the field and in the lab tests for everything I will do. So every data that we collect will be measured in multiple ways. And again, I had to restrict my interests, because as you can see, it's the amount of variables are an incredible amount, and I can only test probably one or two types of wool. Even that is, yes, so it will change so much from one to the other. Yeah.
And the sneaky second question was the elevation that you're working at.
Yeah, I haven't said it, sorry. I'm working both in lowland and upland. So I have sites that are almost at sea level and a couple of sites that are above 600. So the idea that kind of like got like now is a bit too late to apply it, was to test for as many pressures as possible. So, for example, one of my sites has a gigantic population of deer, and I thought it would be really interesting to see how the deer population reacts to wool matting. And as we saw today, corvids could be a problem. And I think these are all incredibly valuable things to learn. And you know, deer pressure on a peatland could be like, I worked a bit in Scotland, and it's terrible. So if we could improve that, and the deer don't care much about the wool, it would be already incredible.
Okay.
Sorry, I went a bit on tangent there.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Jackie here from Longwick Smith Conservation. Just wanted to follow on about the wool product and deer. So I've put out wool logs and wool matting, and where we put wool logs out adjacent to forestry blocks, the deer absolutely annihilated the coir logs and left the wool logs.
Lovely.
Whereas elsewhere on another site where there's no deer, it was actually the corvids and potentially
Okay.
yes, the rabbits that had the impact on the wool and left the coir alone. So that was quite worth of noting.
It wasn't a question, but
No,
nice
no,
to
I
hear.
just wanted to put that forward though.
My name's Megan. I've been doing research on the wool peatland restoration with Sinead at Forum Connemara. I'm just curious, from more of a social standpoint, are the raw wool samples that you've been using local to the area of the farmers in the area that you're working?
So the answer is hopefully. Uh, since I'm struggling to measure pesticides at the moment, and the project was supposed to be that, was supposed to use the next door farmer wool, and we already contacted them, and you know, everybody's agrees. Also because we have the Herdwick in the Lake District where I work, that is less to no value right now as a wool type. Problem is that I don't have the capacity right now to measure pesticides. So what I've done, one of my supervisors works with wool as my English is where is Mary? Is wool as a product for as not a mulch. Yes, compost. Thank you. It's the same word in Italian, by the way. And she gets organic wool. So I probably will use that for now, and I will test the pesticides, parathoid, on the side, either in the lab or also I felt a bit as a scientist, I felt that it wasn't really moral to test wool, moral in a scientific point of view, to test wool that could have pesticides on site, because then I couldn't measure really exactly. So yeah. No worries.